The zombie is the first hostile mob one may discover on his treks across the overworld. Even within the Nether, one does not find solace as zombified piglins roam freely. The depths of the seas and the deserts of the sand are likewise filled with them. So what are they really? Well, my name is Iligr, and today's video is about the creature which vexes so many loreists as they hunt for more fascinating specimena. The mob left going unpopularly as it is seen so commonly. But that doesn't mean its lore should be likewise unseen, does it? I implore you, O viewer, to sit back, relax, and consider the implications of this theory as we dive deep into the maybe magical, perhaps pathogenic, commonmost of Minecraft's mobs. As we hopefully know by now, the zombies and skeletons are part of a broader group called the Undead. There's no necessity for a complicated definition of what Undeath implies, thankfully, because Mojang already made it. Any mob that is called such in the files is such for our purposes. There are, however, a few common traits I think we should observe. Firstly, healing and harming potions always have a reverse effect on undead mobs. Every single creature from zombies to wardens will get hurt by healing potions and healed by harming potions. Secondly, sunlight has the ability to burn them. I've theorized that the sunlight and moonlight are magical, all the way back to their odd inheritances from legends, and the sun seems to be a sort of cosmic opposition to the undead, while the moon is their celestial ally. This is not true for every example, but it is true for the vast majority. This could be due to the sun's apparent healing ability as seen on the sun's grace in Minecraft dungeons. Thirdly, undead mobs are absolutely never targeted by the Wither. Other things, such as the fact they are generally hostile or seem unintelligent, are overgeneralizations, as I find there are a significant portion that don't suffer from these afflictions. Now I think we have somewhat defined what makes these creatures undead trait-wise. Let's therefore talk about the actual cause of these traits, the cause of undeath through magic. All undead creatures are versions of normal mobs. There is no such creature which simply exists as a pure embodiment of undeath without having a host in something else. Thus, they must be versions of these otherwise vivacious creatures. We have here an odd family. Each member is affected by the magic of the sun and moon, and is an atypical variant of a different mob, sometimes passive and sometimes not. So what makes them be the way they are? Is it a disease? We know that in Minecraft there are a couple different sources of magic. More complicated forms may be those of the Orb of Dominance and perhaps hosts, but the more common sources will help us today, especially since the undead are so prevalent. Below the Orb of Dominance sit your beacons and golems, and interestingly, necromancy. The canon novel The Rise of the Arch-Illager by Matt Forbeck has the leader of the undead explain that his power comes from the moon and Archie's from a place far beyond. For this theory, though, we can focus on the simpler former of those two. If you don't know Legend's story, I suggest you watch this video about the Nameless One's role with the Orb of Dominance, but if you don't have time or just need a recap, I basically argue that the night, or at least the first night with undead creatures, if you dislike the dual sun theory, came about from the Piglins' use of the Orb in an attempt to assault the overworld, but was actually a sneaky attempt from the Orb against its hated possessors, the Piglins, to help the undead, who were at the time aiding the hero against the Netherial forces. Basically, the knight's power stems from the Orb of Dominance, which holds the orb and staff of necromancy subsidiary to itself. And this does imply something uncomforting. The undead are actually a coherent system of mobs that can scheme and plot, and while they may not have quite an advanced regimental bureaucracy as that of the Illagers, they do have an ordered structure, which we can explain with a convenient hierarchy. The most basic undead creatures sit at the bottom. These are your sort of foot soldiers, zombies, skeletons, and the rest. Them above, you see necromancers. It seems the undersea cultist group I referenced in my Drowned video have a similar structure to this, but might be totally detached from the main Nameless Empire. Like the desert people, they also have necromancers with a similar-ish set of powers. Then we finally see the head of the undead, the Nameless One, who himself is below the emerald orb he holds. What this proves is that there are some that have not become as mindless as we thought. What this implies, thus, if there is cooperation, structure, and intelligence, is that there cannot just be one label, Undeath, swept over all as an encompassing term. A common idea is that the undead are infected with some sort of disease or other affliction, generally suggested that this is the doing of a mushroom, and well, we'll discuss it more later. I have to say that it doesn't really work. The fauna of Minecraft have a significant amount of lore behind them, and plants can give players effects, as seen in Suspicious Stew, but nothing on level with the zombies we see, and had they also come to something like that, wouldn't they be more uniform and not so organized? Unless the group kept some of their intellect when eating corpse flower Suspicious Stew and managed to make an army, as we see, well, still also, by some way and how, managing to become enlightened with the moon's magic, a school of magic, mind you, that is completely unrelated to the magic we see in potions and stews, it seems impossible that this is right. Mushrooms can take over mobs, as we see with the mushrooms, but it seems as though that's a completely different genre of magic, and they neither burn in sunlight nor have inverted healing/harming affectations. When theorizing, I prefer to always go with the most reasonable theory, rather than the one with more logical jumps, and if we assume that the fungal theory is correct, while simultaneously understanding that dungeons and its portrayal is also canon, we have to make 2 jumps, whilst just admitting dungeons requires 1. I think the mushrooms have a disease, but they seem clearly very different from zombies. Zombified creatures, on the other hand, well, they seem much more alike. Minecraft makes an odd distinction between the zombie mobs, such as zombies and husks and drowned, and the zombified mobs. Those are the piglins and the zoglins. It seems like here in the Nether, where there is no moon, a magical zombie plague cannot as much be, and the creatures resembling zombies are created by different means. That is, the same means as the mushrooms. In Minecraft Legends, we see the Horde of the Spore, one of 3 piglin clans and certainly the most grotesque. While the other 2, the Hordes of the Bastion and Hunt, live in the Nether Waste and Crimson Forest biomes respectively, the Horde of the Spore inhabit a warped forest, and it becomes clear as to why the piglins in the base game fear the place. The piglins have infected bodies, as the warped fungus seems to have breached them and gotten under their skin. Look at the sporeback mobs, especially in their good old c괷ᴇ the Devourer, and you'll see they have fungi literally growing out of their backs. I wouldn't recommend searching up images of it, but it looks a lot like sporotrichosis, which affects especially the arms of its victims, making the group's bandaged back here all the more suspicious, likewise adding to the idea that they are this way due to fungi. Now, assume a dramatic, long-form version of this. Imagine zombification. The fact that the zombified mobs aren't led by a withered necromancer or anything like that, and, like I said, the fact there is a distinct lack of an ethereal moon whence the staff of necromancy could be empowered, leads to one conclusion. This is different. It is its own new natural process. I theorize that the stuff we see in the mushrooms is the same as what we see with the piglins, and the only loose end to this theory is the actual process by which these guys zombify, because in some odd twist that I found peculiar, they actually seem less healthy naturally, as I think they aren't actually hurt by the warped stuff so much as they are healed by the crimson. The fact that the piglins zombify in the end has always struck me as weird. I'd expect the overworld would have alien fungal diseases that they find dangerous, but the end has nothing like that, unless chorus fruit are doing more than we think. No. I think that the piglins are naturally inclined to this disease and have it in themselves unpretentiously, where their bodies are also so used to the crimson fungus that they generally don't have to worry about zombifying since it's so rare that they are totally away from the crimson spores. Legends did show us that they can survive in the overworld with said spores. Dungeons did it too even before that. And the warped fungi certainly don't seem helpful, but they also don't really make the piglins zombify. They just get pretty close. It's not the excess of the warped Rakta that hurts them, it's the total lack of crimson, and that's why the end alongside the overworld is so deadly. That is our answer. The fleshy zombies and osteoskeletons are magically made by the Emerald Staff and the moon, while the Nether's fungi is all that keeps the piglins from a facadedly similar fate. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you liked it. It took forever to make, so I'd appreciate a subscription or a comment, but otherwise I only really ask that you consider this idea and others, and always remain open to neither accept everything I and other theorists suggest, nor close yourself off from everyone else's advice. I'd also like to take just a moment to appreciate some of the fan art I've gotten. I've shown stuff like this in posts before, but these pieces in particular tickled my fancy a lot. Join the Discord to see more of it. I'd love to chat with viewers about all sorts of stuff, and I'll be giving a special role to everyone who joins prior to my reaching of 1,000 subscribers. Alright, no more promoting. Seriously, always act to keep working out the story, always try to know what you like, and no matter what, always remember to keep on luring, because I'll see you next time. Bye.